or is it an illusion? In his travels, Lemuel Gulliver visited a land such as the one we're about to visit. Gulliver had left the world of reality, where objects and people were of a familiar size. In Lilliput, everyone and everything was smaller, tinier, yet precisely perfect in every detail. In the land of model aeronautics, there is a place where men concern themselves with building reality on a Lilliputian scale. They construct small models of full-sized airplanes with such extremes of skill, patience, and precision that our eyes would be fooled if the planes weren't in settings which gave us a reference point to gauge their size. This land of scale modeling is populated by fascinating men, the fascinating planes they create, and the innovative methods they use. Often it's hard to tell what is real and what is not, for the men who build these airplanes are also the pilots who will take us on a wondrous flight into the world of modeling's grand illusions. If there is one overriding factor that goes into the building of these beautiful scale model airplanes, it's time. From the first piece of wood to the last touch of paint, everything is done with meticulous care. And it's not unusual for a modeler to spend 2, 3, or more years of his spare time working to complete a single creation. Planes such as this remarkable Westland Lysander are not uncommon in precision scale competition. Details from the real one are faithfully copied. On the ground, constructions of the caliber of this flying greenhouse seem amazing. In the air, they are breathtaking. A man invests much of himself in building and perfecting one of these beauties, and he can come to care for it in the sense that Van Gogh or Renoir may have cared for their paintings. So while flying them is a joyful experience, it's somewhat tempered by the knowledge that accidents can happen. Minor mishaps or a slight trauma, but a major breakup can be as devastating to the flyer as it is to the aircraft. The tail assembly alone on Robert Pendray's F4B4 consists of 1,000 pieces. This model is far above the ordinary. It has the kind of detail to put it in world-class competition, where in 1978, Great Britain's Mick Reeves won the radio control scale world championship with his Fournier RF4 powered glider. Mick went so far as to scale himself down for the pilot's seat. Most of his static judging points were scored with an incredible cockpit.
All the instruments operate in the cockpit. To start with, when the throttle is opened, it operates the tachometer and the oil pressure gauge. Wow. And the compass operates, the turn and bank units both operate in there. The temperature gauge operates, that registered ambient temperature. The airspeed indicator is operated by blowing into the pitot head, which I'll do now. I can reach it. The altimeter operates by blowing into this static hole here. If I can reach it. The elevator trim tab operates from a gearbox in the cockpit there. The handbrake operates. It's got a ratchet on it and it operates down on the wheel. There's a test button here which lights these two bulbs. And finally, the earphones, if you plug them into the scale jack, press them in, it picks up a radio program and plays music through the earphones.
The music Mick hears is certainly that of a different drummer. But complexity is not necessarily a prerequisite to enjoyment. Soaring planes are not as chock full of intricacies, but while many are not built to scale, there are those radio-controlled soaring enthusiasts who do prefer their gliders to be authentic copies of the real thing. Such people are Ken and Helen Olson of St. Louis, whose fellow club members have built and fly some truly magnificent scale gliders. Smooth and sleek, these bullet-shaped planes are lofted quietly into the air currents where they ebb and flow, catch the sun and toss it back in loops of joy. There is a calmness, a tranquility to this sport that is known only to the modelers and the birds. While soaring is on the peaceful side. You get an earful when Dwayne Johnson cranks up his very rare twin-engine ducted fan F-15A Eagle. Dwayne works for the company that builds the real Eagle, so research was not a difficulty. However, this 11.5-pound gray daughter posed some complex engineering problems and therefore required a year to build. In flight, everything is critical, from the retraction of the landing gear down to the pre-takeoff tightening of the tiniest screw. On this particular flight, a canopy screw was left loose, and when the canopy blew away, the center of gravity shifted. Handling became erratic and quite tricky. But in the end, Dwayne brought her down safely, saving himself a trip to Heartbreak Hotel. Sometimes many of modeling's grand illusionists converge on a single spot. When that spot is Markham Park, Florida, it becomes a gathering of eagles. It's a treat for the flyers who exchange information and examine each other's latest projects. It's also a treat for the spectators who get a look at some new and interesting models. This Cessna 310, owned by Paul Flo, is 1/4 scale and can be built from a kit. Its weight is 29 pounds and the wingspan is 7 feet. It takes between 2 and 3 horsepower to get the Cessna off the ground. A model such as this takes space to build and space to transport. But once it's in the air, it looks real enough to make you want to climb on board. Art Johnson's F-82G Mustang Night Fighter competes in the sports scale category, which means its appearance is judged from a distance of at least 10 feet. In the full-size plane, the pod between the fuselages contained radar equipment. In this plane, one fuselage is for the pilot, one for the navigator observer, who has dual controls for emergencies. In the world of scale modeling, craft like the Night Fighter are giants when compared to the small but complex creations of indoor free flight specialists. The skills required in building these gem-like reproductions are not unlike those required of a surgeon. Planes with wingspans under 13 inches are in the peanut scale category, where the biggest problem is to provide as much scale detail as possible with a minimum of weight. This 1906 French Santos Dumont biplane was copied from the real pre-World War I aircraft. Getting these rubber-powered models to behave like this is a lot tougher than it looks, because they're quite delicate, and all elements must be in perfect balance to obtain flights of satisfactory duration. And of course, indoors, when the flight pattern varies from a circular path, there is always the danger of the aircraft and the landmarks becoming a bit too familiar with each other. Now, here's a unique way to approach the ladder of success. Some guys are natural-born outfielders. On the other hand, there are those who could still use a little practice. Accidents notwithstanding, when the flight is right, these exquisite models really do take to the air on gossamer wings, circling like butterflies or hummingbirds in search of some nectar-filled flower on which to land. In An Escape from the Arena, free flight takes to the outdoors. Transportation is no problem if you don't mind the rush hour crowd. Some of the peanut scale models have private accommodations, and when it comes to travel, they do it in their drawers. One of the attractions of scale modeling is the endless variety of exotic types of aircraft. Some are unique in design, while others are unique in detail and color scheme. Still others may have a unique source of power, like this carbon dioxide-driven miniature, which is flown by Bill Brown, the inventor of the first model airplane gas engine. This World War I German bomber is electric-powered. The large size allows for much realistic detail, but this also means a lot of weight and marginal power. For an airplane like this one, even a short distance liftoff is considered a success. This is the Las Vegas workshop of Bobby Haight, who's built some interesting and unique free flight scale models over the years. Bobby counts among his exotic creations this Hanley Page HP-42. It's electric powered by 4 Astro engines. Again, size allows for detail and rugged construction, which on this day was a blessing, because the usually smooth-flying aircraft decided to go in for a little Alaskan-type bush pilot training. Gasoline power is what is needed to get this large and elaborately built free flight fancy into the air. This airplane takes a combination of sound body design, aerodynamic accuracy, and a properly tuned engine to ensure a successful flight. But even then, there are times when the aircraft has a mind of its own. Sometimes even the smaller models can display an exasperating perversity to do as they darn well please. Because everything must be built to scale, these are not easy airplanes to make fly. But when they do perform as they should, there is magic in the air, and a tiny model becomes an illusion of reality. Carbon dioxide, electric gas, they're all fun. But there will always be felt an undefinable sense of purity when a crisply accurate scale airplane jumps into the sky with only a loop of twisted rubber and a summer breeze to push it along. In control line flying, there are many types of scale models, but few are more interesting than Sam Abdow's XF-92A Delta jet. When building a plane that has a jet engine, certain unique complications arise. But they're worth the trouble because they're fun and a challenge to fly. On the other hand, the weight and power of this four-engine transport exerts a tremendous pull on the flyer, and a certain amount of physical strength is necessary to keep it under control. This extraordinary B-36 intercontinental bomber from the 1950s displays 6 piston engines. There are also 4 dummy jet engines which were added to the real bomber because the prop power alone was barely adequate. This is a real showstopper and a tribute to scale modelers everywhere who, given the challenge, have the ingenuity to get anything to fly. Realistic, accurate, and artistic. These are the only words to describe Alvin Schaefer's Grumman F3F2. Winner of many prizes, this plane features operable cockpit controls, lights, bomb drop, opening access panels, full rivet lines, scale rib spacing, and more. This plane points out an irony of life, that the more perfect something looks, the easier it appears to the unschooled observer. Because the aircraft we have seen were as simple in their perfection as Waterford crystal, it's hard to imagine the huge expenditure of effort that goes into them. One man who does know the challenges of trying to build a world-class scale model is Bill Boss, who's at work on a control line mosquito bomber of World War II vintage.
The most challenging aspects of scale modeling to me is the fact that there are not on the market many of the things required to build a scale model airplane. The operating features that are required, bomb bay doors, revolving turrets, even the firing of guns or cannons can be duplicated in scale models, but it takes a tremendous amount of patience, time, and effort. And here is where the real challenge lies in scale modeling. An example of this might be in my latest scale model, the Mosquito that I'm building. We have a oxygen hose that the man had attached to his mask. Well, how do you duplicate this where the oxygen hose is something like 1/8 of an inch in diameter? Well, my daughter came up with a solution that worked out very well. And that was just the fact that you would make a coil of wire and wind it very tightly, put it out over another piece of wire, and then paint it up and bend it to the shape that's required to make it appear as though it was an oxygen hose within the cockpit of the airplane. Each one of the things that is done to make an operational feature takes many hours of time, and here's where the real challenge is in the airplane. You're not only a model airplane builder, you're a designer, you're an architect, you're an engineer of sorts, you even become a machinist, turning things out on a lathe. Many times you have to go to extremes to try to duplicate one-piece part. You make celastic rubber molds, but first starting with a wooden pattern, much like machine shop work, where patterns are made, cast in sand, and then a mold is poured. Well, we do the same thing with some of the features that we put on an airplane, a fairing of an airplane, fairing of landing gear. In this case, we use epoxy resins instead of casting a metal. An epoxy resin will do very nicely. And when finished and painted up properly, it looks just like a metal piece. One of the major problems with building my Mosquito bomber was my ability to find the detail that it required to make the operational features and or finish off the skin of the airplane. Some of the things that we look for in prints, drawings, photographs that you would use to substantiate what you've done with a model was not readily found. Most of the detail that's in this type of plastic model is very accurate. However, this particular one did not have one of the features that I wanted to build into my Mosquito bomber, and that is operating bomb bay doors. The bomb bay doors of the Mosquito probably presented one of the most interesting challenges in the building of this ship. The fact that there are so many things that have to happen in a certain sequence or have to happen properly to make the bomb bay doors look realistic. There are 46 versions of the Mosquito bomber. The version that I chose was one that uses a plastic bubble in its nose and place for the bombardier. Once you put that plastic bubble in its nose, rather than just a solid nose with a couple of cannons sticking there, you now have the responsibility of adding some detail there so that when people look through the plastic bubble, they're going to see the thing as though it was a real airplane. So after that's completed, we now have the added problem of doing a two-seat cockpit. We have duplicate instrumentation. We've got a two-engine airplane, which means that the majority of instruments are duplicated. It's just the amount of time required, and I think this is where, for me, the real challenge is in scale building, is duplicating this intricate stuff.
Intricate stuff requires 6 control lines on Bill Boss's 3-year project. There are extra lines for operating running lights, bomb bay doors, dropping of bombs, and droppable fuel tanks. The finished Mosquito is poetic in its beauty, and exterior detail is just about perfect, even down to the paint, fabric, and aluminum materials used in the building. All of these details are point producers in competition, but in scale modeling, whether it be control line, free flight, or radio control, all the detail in the world doesn't matter if the airplane doesn't fly. The Mosquito bomber looks like it can be a winner. So where does it go from here?
The next step is competition. 1965, I was fortunate enough with the PT-19 to win a second place at the U.S. Nationals. Ever since that time, I've had a burning desire to win trophies. Fortunately, I've won a few. However, my goals now are a little different. Someday, I hope that the Mosquito bomber will take me to the World Championships.
Bob Underwood of St. Louis is a man who has realized that dream. A builder and flyer of some excellent radio-controlled planes, he was a member of the U.S. international team that flew at Woodvale, England in 1978. This hyperbite was the plane that Bob built especially for the World Championships. And before he left for England, he assessed his chances.
How do you think the hyperbite will do in competition?
Well, I don't know. It's a nice flying airplane, and it's pretty scale. We've got some pretty good detail on it. I hope it'll do well. It's an unusual airplane with the wide fuselage and all of that sort of thing. Well, we'll just have to wait and see what we do, won't we?
What Bob did was finish second in the world. Given the competition, this was a remarkable achievement. For at Woodvale, every plane was a winner. Some planes like Bob's and this 1912 Blackburn by A. Steinberger of West Germany received bonus points for construction complexity. Not everyone received bonus points, so a plane really had to be special to earn them. The Blackburn was certainly that, both on the ground and in the air. At Woodvale, these grand illusions were carefully judged by experts, whether it was in the precision or sport scale category.
This is the one that's brush painted, this. Okay. The colours look good.
That's supposed to be outlined. I don't know, you
Yeah.
can't see it on there.
We're short of a little bit of black paint there, just around these edges.
But this is more of scratch. That's too block.
Yeah, and I think the whole lettering is about half an inch small.
Yeah.
Easy half an inch, which is a lot.
Sport scale judging was done at a distance of 3 meters, but entries in the precision scale category were scrutinized at quite close quarters. In 1977, this de Havilland chipmunk won the precision scale category. But in '78, it finished second in static judging to the Fournier RF-4, in which every cockpit instrument was operable. Nonetheless, if ever there was a full-size plane that was sprinkled with pixie dust and shrunk down to perfection, the chipmunk is it. This plane was one of only 3 that scored over 2,600 points in the static precision competition, where an international panel of judges with most exacting standards reviewed each aircraft carefully.
Well, the main error is in this shape here, isn't it?
On the bottom.
And the bottom.
These are wrong.
And the front cut out.
That's wrong.
And the exhaust, sorry.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Well,
and a half.
I think actually that alters the whole character of the aeroplane, so it should be down-marked accordingly.
It's 5 or 6.
A Northrop P-61 Black Widow belonging to Britain's Brian Taylor scored the most complexity points. The paint job looked like a Jackson Pollock canvas and was one of its outstanding features. In the air, this plane was a black beauty to behold. Despite a landing that dealt out wheels like playing cards, the Black Widow was relatively unscathed, and the pilot a lot luckier than another man who had spent years trying to get to the World Championships. The man was Ireland's Joe McCullum, whose tipsy nipper scored high in the static judging, and even had a scale dipstick to check the oil. It also had many cockpit features that were impressive to the judges. In looking at these magnificent miniaturizations, it is again important to emphasize the hundreds of hours that go into building them. It must be remembered that every flight is crucial because one lapse, one failure, one stroke of bad luck can play havoc with a man's emotions. Joe McCullum's first flight at the World Championships bore testament to these hard truths. Only seconds after takeoff, the tipsy Nipper plummeted to earth from a height of approximately 100 feet. The damage to plane and pilot was considerable. The fault, apparent radio malfunction, and Joe's ambitions ended in an ill-fated flight. While this was a low point, one of the high points was the demonstration flying of this Boeing 747. With a wingspan of 11 feet and a weight of 58 pounds, it was a certain crowd pleaser on size alone. Powered by 4 HP-60 engines, the 747 involved a team of 6 men who used 2 transmitters for flight. One for the inner engines and control surfaces, the other for outboard engines and a lighting system. Interestingly, British Airways uses this model to put on demonstrations at small airports where people have never seen a full-size 747 take off or land. While the 747 was one of the more impressive of the grand illusions unveiled at Woodvale, the giant of the exhibition show was something to exclaim about. This Lancaster bomber has a wingspan of 18 feet and a weight of 120 pounds, and took 6 men nearly 3 years to complete. The crew communicates through an earphone setup because, as would be expected, the 4 engines put out some decibels. The control system employs 2 transmitters, one for throttles, the other for flight controls.
Okay, ready to go?
Yes, sir.
Everything checked out. All motors okay? Power on, let's go.
Since the takeoff speed was 40 miles per hour, chase cars were needed to follow it down the runway in order to watch its handling. Although the actual flight was neither extended nor of a high altitude, the Lancaster did get up and did land without mishap. Upon viewing this massive beast, one wonders how much further modeling's grand illusions will go before they themselves become the reality. Giant models and international contests aside, the backbone of scale modeling is men like Bud Chappell. Bud has turned building and flying scale airplanes into family events. As he says, I get a thrill out of all of us being together. I like to watch our youngest son teach his son to fly. It's on days like this that I realize this hobby has a great future. And it's on sapphire, vibrant days like this that Bud and his counterparts everywhere can be happy that they have discovered the scaled-down world of modeling's grand illusion.